Good evening, everyone. I am Giancarlo Guerrero, Music Director of the Nashville Symphony, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce our great friend, the wonderful Grammy Award-winning composer, Michael Daugherty. Good evening, Michael.
Great to be here.
It's great to see you. I'm assuming that you're using this time to be doing a lot of work and composing and working on all your future projects.
Well, composing, I'm organizing my record collection, going on bicycle rides, just enjoying the simple things of life.
Of course, and I assume that you've been teaching until now. You're a professor at the University of Michigan, and I believe maybe you may have finished school. So were you able to continue teaching through the online structure?
Right, we were doing, Zooming sessions with students, and I teach press, and so what they would do, they would send me PDFs and MP3s. I listen to them, I call them on the phone, and we would talk about it. So not ideal, but the best we could do under the circumstances.
Well, I wonder what Beethoven or Mozart would have done with something like this, having to teach or learn, from the distance.
Who knows, man? I think with Beethoven, I think with him, you wanted to stay away from him because he was a difficult guy.
Well, yeah, and of course, with his, impending deafness, eventually this not would have worked at all.
I mean, that's the one thing. When you read the stories about composers of the past, some of those people, like Wagner and Beethoven and others, were very difficult people. But today, you really can't be that way to be a composer. You have to be a nice guy.
Well, it was the whole idea of the temperamental artist, back in the day, you were supposed to be temperamental and difficult, and I think that was one of the attractive things. I think in many ways we still have that with some of the pop culture Hollywood people, but I think you're right, with classical musicians, we just want to collaborate with each other.
Yeah, that's one of the things I like about you is that the way you talk to your musicians, the way you deal with people, very down to earth. It's great.
Well, it's always about the music. I don't know if, it's always, to me, the reason why I became a musician was precisely this. The privilege of making music and collaborating with some of the greatest artists and people that have basically made me who I am as a person and as a conductor, because it's been inspiring. And the fact that I very proudly call myself a champion of Michael Daugherty's music is something that I cherish very much.
Well, you've always been very, very kind. I remember when I was a young composer, like 25 years ago, I was introduced to Laurent Mazel at the Pittsburgh Symphony. I had to go down to his office, and his office was like 20, like there was a desk and you would sit 20 feet away, and said, "So you think you're a composer?"
Well, he was practicing social distancing back then, sounds like. Well, good. And as I said, look at you now. So, you and I go back several years by now, but more importantly, you have a very special relationship with the Nashville Symphony, because both of our recordings of your music have garnered us Grammy Awards.
I know, it's so amazing. And I was able to be there each time too and accept the awards. So,
well,
I know you've never been there.
I've never been to the Grammy Awards, but you've always told me that it is quite the experience. And so at some point, hopefully in the future, I will get nominated again and I'll be able to make the trip. Maybe we'll go together when we do the third.
The thing about the red carpet is if you want to be noticed on the red carpet, you have to dress outlandishly. So either you have to wear like really strange clothes or dye your hair green or something, or wear a strange hat. Otherwise, when I walked down the red carpet, they just said, "Keep going."
Of course. So
I'm just a normal person.
Maybe next time when we get nominated for the third Michael Daugherty recording, which I know we're going to be making in the future, for sure you and I will go together and you will show me the ropes, I guess.
Right.
So let's talk about, the first recording that we made, which had, of course, one of your most performed pieces, which is the Metropolis Symphony, along with a brand new piano concerto, Deus Machina, which I had the privilege of premiering. But interestingly enough, this also kind of coincided with my appointment as music director of the Nashville Symphony. This was my first recording with the orchestra. And if you remember correctly, we didn't really plan to record this. We were just going to play the piece. And then it came out so fantastically that all of us came together, including Alan Valentine, the orchestra CEO, that said, this is just too good to pass up. So let's just, make a recording out of this, out of the performances, and look at what happened.
I know, it was amazing. Well, if I remember correctly, they were recording the concert for a broadcast, and they brought a producer down, Blanton Asfow, who was a producer for Boston. So you had a great producer, you had all these microphones set up, And they, really, like you said, they weren't planning to record a release, but it turned out so well. That was great. And you were not the music director yet either. You were a guest.
I was just a candidate for the job. I mean, I just came and conducted, and but like I said, I mean, it was just like the perfect storm. Everything just came together. The orchestra played fabulously. I mean, what you hear in these recordings is the actual performance from a live concert. And I mean, just the energy and everything was captured. And as I said, I mean, becoming music director of the orchestra, and then having this be my first recording, and boom, we both win our first Grammys. I understand it was your first Grammy as well, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then after you were appointed music director, right after that, because everyone was so blown away with how you conducted that concert. Then you suggested we do another work, so we did Metropolis Symphony the next year, I believe.
That is correct.
And then the recording came out.
Beethoven violin concerto on that same program, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's a long piece.
I remember it vividly. I mean, I don't know, maybe it was the concert is special, but the fact that this was obviously my first year was indeed, you know, I have very fond memories of that moment. But if I remember, the premiere of Deus Ex Machina was actually in Charlotte, in North Carolina. They were one of the co-commissioners. Yes. And then I came to Nashville to do, I guess, the second performance. But I have to say that something that is very clear in my mind as we were doing the premiere of Deus Ex Machina, you were still kind of working on the piece, correct?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I think that you really don't know what a piece is going to sound like until you hear it played live. Now, I do work with a computer and MIDI technology and computer playback of my sounds, like what they do for film music. But there's nothing like a real orchestra playing it. But I do remember you were very kind to let me make some changes. One of them was at the very beginning, I decided to have the piano strum in the beginning inside the piano, I remember. And we made some adjustments.
Yeah, you and Terrence Wilson, the soloist, actually started experimenting on stage and literally playing with the instrument.
Yeah, it was and I also remember that the Charlotte Symphony, I believe, either had or was just about ready. I think they had gone on strike, or they were going to go on strike. So you came in as a guest conductor, dealing with a very difficult scene there with the players, and you just came in and charmed everybody. And they don't do modern music very often, and then we did this piece, and then we took it to Nashville and so forth, and then the rest is history.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, we're going to be playing some excerpts, some examples of some of your music, of course, from the Nashville Symphony recording. But let's talk about the Metropolis Symphony, of course, which is a fascinating work, which actually I knew way before you and I met. I mean, this is one of the great 20th century American symphonies. I mean, it's a work that has always captivated me. And the fact that I was not only going to get to do it, but the fact that you were going to be there kind of scared me a little bit. And if you remember, you and I actually met in Minnesota when I was the associate conductor there. We accidentally met, I think, in a coffee shop across the street.
In a coffee shop across from the Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And you said, "Aren't you Michael Daugherty?" Yeah, we just met. That was the first time we met.
Listen, I had I like a 15-year-old groupie. I looked at you and said, "That guy looks familiar." I mean, I had to go and say hello.
And then a couple years later, you invited me to the Eugene Symphony, where you were the music director at that time. And so that was the first time we got to hang out, you know, with you conducting my music and so forth. And then the next time was in Charlotte. So
isn't that amazing how fate and luck in many ways? You were in Minnesota doing some composer forum thing. You weren't even doing it with the Minnesota Orchestra with whom I was associated. I mean, we just happened to be at the right place at the right time.
Yeah. Well, that's how it happens, right? You know, it's all about timing, as they say.
You know, I think it's remarkable. As I said, I mean, I cherish not only our collaboration, but of course our friendship. And just a couple of days ago, you and I were talking on the phone, and we ended up talking for about an hour because, I mean, we have so much to share, especially nowadays. We both had to learn how to speak on the phone again.
Yeah, it's like, wow, yeah.
So let's talk about the Metropolis Symphony. Can you tell us about how this came about and the original commission? The piece is from the 80s, correct?
Yeah, I was a young composer. I was just like 30-some years ago. I was just starting out, coming up with my aesthetic, which was being inspired by popular culture in America or historical culture in America to write music. And so I remember that it was at the time I was going to write a piece for the Cleveland Chamber Orchestra. It was the 50th anniversary of the creation of the Superman comics. And so I had the idea to write something to commemorate that. So I wrote 2 movements, Mitzitz-Pitalik, who's the imp for the 5th dimension, and O Lois, as in Lois Lane. I remember that most composers at the time were writing abstract, atonal music with no melody, no reference. I remember I told a couple of my fellow colleagues at Oberlin College, where I was teaching, I was going to do this. They said, that's a terrible idea. Why would you want to do that? You know. But anyways, I wrote this piece, and it just made an impact right away. I continued writing other movements because I wanted to keep going. And then David Zinman heard about it because Christopher Rouse, who was a guest composer at Oberlin, he there as a student, he was composer in residence with the Baltimore Symphony. He then recommended it to David Zinman, who didn't know me. This is before the days of PDFs and MP3, so I actually had to send like scores in the mail with a cassette tape, if you can imagine. He decided to program one of the movements, and then I pretty much had finished it, and then the Man of Steel DC Comics. And so Zinman told me, you've got to write one more movement, The Death of Superman. So that's Red Cape Tango. And then he performed the whole thing at Carnegie Hall. There was a record producer there from Decca who heard it, and it was recorded way back then. That kind of got me going. But the Red Cape Tango, I thought it'd be nice to hear the ending of that piece, which uses the Dies Irae theme, you know, the theme of death used in the Catholic Church, with the tango, which is also a dance of death, kind of Superman dancing to his death, and that's Red Cape being like a bullfighter, and also the King of Superman. So, of course, we know that Superman will come back from the dead, so it has a huge ending.
By the way, did you read Superman comics when you were growing up?
I did. When I grew up in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, I'm the oldest of 5 boys. We took tap dancing lessons. In the room where we would wait for the tap dancing lessons, the woman had comic books. This is back in the early 60s, and the Superman, the Batman, all those kind of comics. And so I used to read those all the time. And I always loved the artwork. I love the colors. I prefer DC over Marvel comics personally. I prefer the artwork in the DC comics. And you know, it's kind of like a myth, like a Greek myth, or you know, whatever. Yeah, so we used to do tap dancing and reading the Superman comics. So well,
let's go ahead and listen to an excerpt from the last movement of the Metropolis Symphony, and this is the ending of the Red Cape Tango. I have to say that that brings so many great memories, man.
It was really a gas. And you know, what's exciting about the piece, you can't see it, but there's two cymbal players separated in stereo, one on the left or the right side, and they have to go ding, 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 left, right. And you have to coordinate that, and you did a great job of that. Because usually the cymbal players get messed up there, so that was good.
Well, I have to ask you, I mean, did you have to clear this with DC Comics? I mean, in terms of the copyright issues of having to do a piece about Superman?
Well, when I wrote the piece, the Superman was sort of off the radar. This is before Batman and, you know, the first movie, and when the comic books really became this huge industry, you know, of a business world, which it is today. No, I did not. And part of the reason that I think it was okay, first of all, the word I don't use, like, it's not called Superman Symphony, for example. It's called Metropolis Symphony, so it's generic.
Now, is this
so
your only symphony, by the way? Is this your only symphony you've ever written?
Well, actually, you know, I've written other big orchestra pieces. They really are symphonies, and what I think what I'm going to do is actually put in parentheses. Sorry, I'm gonna start over. I think what I'm going to do is put in parentheses, you know, Symphony number 1, number 2, number 3, because they're large orchestra works, and I call them like Ghost Ranch or Night Owl or whatever. But I think it might be helpful to categorize them in that particular way.
Well, especially in this year, the 50th anniversary of Beethoven's birth. You know, I mean, I don't think any composer can get away from the fact that when you write a symphony or are thinking of that, I mean, that Beethoven ghost is kind of behind you, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think there's again, there's certain composers who don't want to use generic terms or whatever, but these are a lot of, I've written other large works, and so I think it'd be good to have a subtitle as Symphony number 10 or something, you know.
Something that characterizes your music writing is that you do travel a lot, and you get inspired by the sites and places that you visit. And so the next piece, which is the piano concerto that is in that same recording, Deus Ex Machina, I mean, it's a very exciting title. Can you tell us about it?
Well, sure. I mean, I'm a huge fan of trains, actually, and Winston was a photographer in the 1950s who took these amazing photos of trains, of the steam trains, the last days of the steam trains in Virginia and West Virginia. And so this is a trip on a train, so to speak, the last movement. I should also say that I grew up playing piano, and boogie woogie was the first kind of piano playing I learned. In fact, I don't know if I'll see if you can hear me. If I just play a little boogie woogie.
Somebody has been practicing.
So anyway, that's kind of the music I grew up playing. You know, Mozart grew up playing waltzes. I grew up playing boogie woogie.
Now, can you talk about the fact that actually
really,
you played lounge piano, right? I mean, can you tell us about that?
Yeah. I mean, you know, even Schoenberg played lounge piano at one point. Yeah, I mean, you know, to survive as a composer, you have to be very flexible and inventive. So everything from I played in mafia restaurants in New Jersey. I've played in bar mitzvahs, weddings. You name it, I played it. You know.
Did you ever meet anybody famous?
One of the things you have to do. What's that?
Did you meet anybody famous?
I do remember when I was hired to play at a restaurant in New Jersey. I came in because they said they were looking for piano players. I came in, said, "Hi, I play piano." And he said, "Okay, you're hired." I said, "Well, don't you want to hear me play?" He said, "If I said you're hired, you must be good, right?" I said, "Okay, that'll be interesting." You know, one of the things I did too is when I was a student in New York is I was an usher at Carnegie Hall, and I was able to hear amazing concerts. I heard Bernstein conduct the Mahler cycle. I heard von Karajan do the Beethoven cycle. I just heard all these amazing orchestra concerts. And you know, I also played for dance classes when they play at the bar, you know, and I had to play stuff. So I've done about everything you can imagine. Probably the most interesting gig I had when I was studying with György Ligeti, the composer in Germany. I was completely broke. And I played in a place called the Reeperbahn in Hamburg, down by the harbor, which was the red light district. And there was an ex-Vietnam vet, expatriate, who owned a bar called Dennis Swing Club. And I used to play jazz piano on that club. So, you know, so I really appreciate where I am today, because believe me, I have paid my dues, let me tell you.
Well, no surprise that you ended up writing this piano concerto, Deus Ex Machina. So now we're going to hear the last movement of Deus Ex Machina, and this is Night's Theme.
Night's Theme, here it is. Yeah, wow. That's amazing. Actually, I have can you see this
Yeah.
cover? Yeah, so there's a photograph of Owenston Lake, one of the photographs he took of the train.
Okay.
So you kind of get an idea of what I was inspired by for the piece.
Well, obviously, after the success of this project and the recording and everything that came with the Grammy, we immediately, I guess, almost immediately started talking about what's the next project. And a few years later, I mean, you mentioned that you had wanted to write a cello concerto.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about different potential soloists, and we settled on our great friend Joe Bailey, who did an amazing job with this piece, which you called Tales of Hemingway. Tell us about it.
Well, sure. I mean, I've always been a huge fan of Hemingway, and I wanted to, you know, write a piece related the literature and into music. So I took 4 works that Hemingway had done. So there's 4 movements. The first one is a short story by Hemingway called Big Two-Hearted River, and then For Whom the Bell Tolls is a novel, and then also The Old Man and Sea, which is an amazing, very short novel. And then finally, The Sun Also Rises, which is about bullfighters in Spain. And Hemingway was a bigger than life.
You told me that he gave you the chance to write Spanish music, toreador music.
Yeah, Spanish music and bullfight. I mean, I'm not a fan of bullfights actually, but I was in Valencia, Spain last year, and I did. When you come out of the train station, the bullfighting ring is right next to the train station. That is where Hemingway went. He wrote that novel, actually. Mm-hmm. So I did go and see it. But yeah, it was a kind of like Red Cape Tango, but now we're actually a bullfighter Red Cape, and it was a chance to write some Spanish music.
So here is really the movement, The Old Man and the Sea, from the Tales of Hemingway, with Drew Bailey as cello soloist.
Yeah, and what I wanted to do this one, we played some fast music, so I thought we'll play a little slow music, because I do write melodies, and that's one thing I'm really into, writing melodies. I think it's really hard to do, and you think the great songs of the past, Gershwin, Cole Porter, on and on, these guys wrote amazing melodies. I wanted to really write something that really had emotion, that was very heartfelt, and really gave the cellist a chance to sing. So let's hear The Old Man and the Sea. One of the things I remember about this recording, first of all, it was the world premiere, right? And we were adjusting things right at the last minute, like right up to when he walked to the stage. I said, maybe you could do this, in the dressing room. But it all came together, and I just remember the audience was just incredibly focused. And when the piece was over, just erupted. It was really, really something.
And this has become also another one of your most performed pieces, correct?
Yeah, I mean, Zool is the primary cellist he's playing, but I think he's performed about, I think he said about sorry, say it over again. Zool told me he's performed it about 100 times, about, because he'll do it maybe two or three concerts. Yeah. Sorry, I'll start over again. When he performs it, he might do it for a weekend, so he might do it 2 or 3 times. But he's played it all over the world, actually.
Well, we did it in Brazil.
Other cellists are playing it too.
You came to Brazil.
Was that?
You came.
Yeah,
to
we went
to.
I remember. Yeah, came to São Paulo, Brazil. That was fantastic, and you conducted, and Zool was there as well. So that was great. Yeah, so it's a piece that has legs, which is really exciting because, to be honest with you, a lot of composers write concertos or play once and that's it, kind of thing. But this one seems to really have made an impact, and the recording helped immensely. And I was very excited that it was awarded the best composition and
best solo
as the Deus Ex Machina as well. Yeah, and then also the performance by the orchestra. I mean, so I think this one won 3 Grammys. Yeah. This recording.
Correct. Now, in that same recording, we also showcase another fabulous soloist who is Paul Jacobs, the great organist. And this is a piece that you wrote called "Once Upon a Castle," which is really an organ concerto. And had you written for organ before?
I had a little bit. I mean, I grew up as a kid. I used to go to a church near my house in Iowa, and I would go in the afternoon, like a Sunday afternoon, and sneak into the sanctuary and play the organ. But I never was very, very good at the foot pedals. And really what the organ is really about how you play with your feet, because a lot of the action is down there. Also, how you register the orchestra, the different sounds you come up with, is part of the talent of the organist. And Paul Jacobs is a guy, like, he never makes a mistake. It's unbelievable. And he loves playing in Nashville. He loves that organ. And it's huge. I mean, I think he said, like, it was one of the loudest works you've ever conducted. Is that right?
You're right, yeah. And that we're fortunate that not only do we have the great orchestra on the Great Hall, but it also comes with a fabulous instrument, this wonderful concert organ that makes you composer, guests, and soloists go crazy.
Yeah, and what also makes a difference is that you're lucky that you have a detachable console. So the actual, instead of playing way up in a loft far away, you can actually, there's a console on the stage. So he's like a piano soloist. You can see his feet, you can see his hands. He can communicate right, with the conductor. So that makes a huge, difference as well. And the title "Once Upon a Castle" is inspired by the Hearst Castle. I'm a huge fan of road trips, as we talked about, and one of my favorite drives is Monterey, California, down Highway 1, along Big Sur, where the Hearst Castle is. It's up in this hill. It was built by Randolph Hearst, who probably wasn't the greatest guy in the world. He was one of the richest men in the 1930s. He spent 20 years building this castle with 180 rooms. Every famous person in the world came there for parties, and it was like the place to be. And this last movement we're going to hear, Xanadu, it plays off the movie by Orson Welles, Citizen Kane, which was about Randolph Hearst. So it kind of ties in together with the movie by Orson Welles, the Hearst Castle and my love of Big Sur and taking that road trip.
Well, let's hear Xanadu from Once Upon a Castle with Paul Jacobs and the Nashville Symphony. Well, that is unbelievable music. Michael, I'm so grateful that you took the time to come and visit with us and relive these wonderful memories of the performances and the recording. And really, thank you for taking the time.
Well, and I hope to visit you someday in your lovely condo in Miami on the 30th floor, wherever it is. It looks amazing.
Well, me too. I hope you come and visit us. I mean, we're all kind of quarantine and finding places to, relax. And I'm still working. I'm sure you are too. And looking forward to getting back to playing great concerts for a wonderful audience.
I'm sure we will be back because we always find a cure. It's like in Star Trek when Bones, at the end of the doctor, finds the antidote at the end of the shot or a drink you take, and that there's some disease on the Enterprise. So I'm sure they will find the vaccine. We'll be back in Nashville, and it's amazing.
Thank you so much, Michael. Have a good night, my friend. Take care.
Very much. Bye.